It was a crisp, overcast afternoon in the heart of London, the kind of weather where the sky feels as if it could break open at any moment, unleashing torrents of rain upon the streets below. The majestic Buckingham Palace stood in all its glory, its golden gates shimmering faintly in the grey light. The tourists, as usual, had gathered in droves around the gates, cameras in hand, eager to snap photos of the imposing palace and the famed royal guard. These men, dressed in their iconic red tunics and towering black bearskin hats, stood motionless, their faces as stern as stone statues. They were known to maintain an unwavering composure, no matter what antics the public threw at them. But on this particular day, something was about to happen that no one could have predicted. A group of young men, clearly intoxicated and overflowing with bravado, were wandering along the palace grounds, causing a stir among the visitors. They were loud, obnoxious, and disrespectful, three characteristics that were not typically seen around the sacred grounds of the palace. As they approached the guard post, their eyes fell upon the royal guardsman standing tall in front of the gates, unmoving, his eyes staring straight ahead. One of the men, a tall, burly figure named Jason, nudged his friends and whispered, "Watch this." He strode confidently toward the guard, a smirk playing on his lips. He had heard the stories, how the royal guards never broke character, never flinched, never acknowledged anyone. The idea that these men, who were revered for their discipline and honor, could be toyed with seemed almost too good to be true. It was the perfect challenge, and Jason wasn't about to let it pass. He walked up to the guard and, with a mocking tone, shouted, "Oi, you're not gonna smile, huh? What's wrong? Too serious for us common folk." The crowd around them began to chuckle, some even recording the encounter on their phones, as if they were watching a daredevil performance. The guard, as expected, did not flinch. His posture remained impeccable, his eyes fixed ahead. "Come on, mate," Jason taunted, his voice rising. "What's the point of standing there like a statue? If you're not gonna move, I'll make you move." With a defiant chuckle, he took a step closer, as if daring the guard to react. The tension in the air thickened. The guard still didn't move, his stoic demeanor never wavering, but something about the way he stood, rigid, like a spring coiled tight, hinted that there was more to this standoff than anyone realized. Then, without warning, the guard's voice broke through the silence, like a whip crack. "Step back, sir," he said in a low, controlled tone. "You are infringing on my space." His words were measured, calm, but there was an underlying edge to them that made Jason pause for a fraction of a second. He hadn't expected the guard to speak at all, let alone with such authority. Jason, however, was far from backing down. "Oh, now you speak," he scoffed. "Big man with a tiny hat thinks he can intimidate me?" He took another step closer, his friends egging him on with laughter and jeers. The crowd was starting to grow, some encouraging Jason, others feeling the growing discomfort in the air. But all the while, the guard remained unmoved, his eyes fixed ahead, his body like iron. But then, Jason did something that no one could have predicted. He reached forward, daring to tap the guard's shoulder, a final act of disrespect that would surely provoke a response. That's when the magic happened. With a speed that seemed almost supernatural, the royal guard's hand shot out, gripping Jason's wrist with a vice-like strength that sent a shock of pain through his arm. Before anyone could react, the guard spoke, his voice now low and menacing. "You've made a grave mistake." For a split second, there was absolute silence. The crowd held their breath, uncertain of what would happen next. Jason tried to pull his arm back, but the guard's grip tightened, and Jason winced in pain. "Let go, mate," he hissed, trying to wriggle free. But the guard's response was swift. He yanked Jason toward him, his movements smooth and controlled, as if he had practiced this exact moment 1,000 times. "You will not disrespect me, nor the institution I serve," the guard said firmly. Without another word, he pushed Jason backward with a single, powerful motion, sending him sprawling onto the cold stone pavement. The crowd gasped. Jason's friends immediately rushed forward, but the guard stood his ground, his hand now resting on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. "I suggest you leave before I take further action." For a moment, no one moved. The tension was palpable, the reality of what had just occurred settling in. Jason, now nursing his pride and nursing a bruised ego, slowly got to his feet. The color drained from his face as he realized just how foolish he had been. The royal guard, stoic as ever, stood as a sentinel, unmoved by the drama unfolding before him. But that wasn't the end of it. The incident quickly went viral. Videos of Jason's failed attempt to mess with the guard flooded social media, with millions of views pouring in within hours. People from all over the world watched, captivated by the swift, precise justice that the royal guard had delivered. They marveled at his composure, his unwavering discipline, and his effortless handling of the situation. The public response was overwhelming. Most were in awe of the guard's actions, while others criticized Jason for his childish behavior. As for Jason, the shame of his public humiliation stayed with him. He faced ridicule from his friends, who had egged him on, and from the internet, where memes and jokes about his failure circulated relentlessly. Even his own family couldn't escape the wave of embarrassment, as Jason's younger sister received mocking messages from her friends about her brother's antics. His reputation, once filled with swagger and bravado, was now tarnished by his encounter with the royal guard. But the true punishment came a few days later when Jason received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was a formal warning from the palace, stating that his actions had not only disrupted public order, but also dishonored the royal guard and their service to the monarchy. Jason was banned from visiting any royal properties for a year and, in an ironic twist of fate, was also publicly listed on a notorious prankster watch list, a list that deterred future visitors from attempting similar stunts. The full weight of his actions hit Jason like a ton of bricks. He had gone from being the center of attention, the brash figure who thought he could take on the world, to a cautionary tale, a lesson to others who might be foolish enough to think they could challenge the institution that had stood for centuries. For the royal guard, however, the incident was nothing more than another day at the office. They had dealt with far worse over the years. Yet, the public's admiration for their discipline only grew, with many praising the guard's dedication not just to their duties, but to maintaining a sense of respect and honor that was becoming increasingly rare in the modern world. As for Jason, the lesson was clear. There are some things in life you don't mess with, and the royal guard is at the top of that list. Instant karma, in all its glory, had struck, and it left behind a trail of humility and reflection that Jason, and the world, would never forget. The city of London was alive with its usual buzz. Tourists roamed the streets, marveling at the sights, their cameras clicking as they captured every detail of the historic landmarks. The overcast skies stretched endlessly, casting a gray hue over the city, but the weather did nothing to dull the excitement of those visiting Buckingham Palace. For many, this was a dream come true, a chance to witness the grandeur of British royalty and, of course, to see the famous royal guards in action. Standing tall in their bright red uniforms and imposing bearskin hats, the guards were more than just symbols of tradition. They were a testament to discipline, precision, and honor. Their unwavering stoicism had become the stuff of legend. No matter the antics of tourists trying to get a reaction, the guards stood firm, silent, and immovable. But beneath that calm exterior lay a deep pride and an unspoken warning. The royal guard was not to be trifled with. Among the sea of eager tourists that day was a group of young men who seemed completely out of place. Dressed in casual clothes, with loud voices and an air of mischief, they drew attention wherever they went. At the center of the group was Jason, a tall, muscular man with a cocky grin and an overabundance of confidence. His friends, Liam, Danny, and Chris, were just as boisterous, their laughter echoing across the palace grounds. Jason had always been the ringleader of their group. He thrived on attention. The bigger the audience, the better. So, when they reached the gates of Buckingham Palace and spotted the royal guards standing stiffly at their posts, Jason saw an opportunity he couldn't resist. "Hey, lads," Jason said, his voice dripping with mischief. "You reckon these guys are as tough as they look? Bet I can make one of them crack." His friends laughed, egging him on. "Go on then," Liam said. "Show us what you've got." Jason puffed out his chest and strode toward the nearest guard, his every step brimming with arrogance. The crowd began to take notice, phones coming out as people anticipated a scene. Jason stopped a few feet from the guard, staring him down. The guard, a young man named Corporal Ethan Davies, remained motionless, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Ethan had been a member of the Royal Guard for 3 years and had seen his fair share of pranksters. He was no stranger to antics like these, but he knew better than to engage. His job was to stand firm no matter what. Jason smirked and leaned in closer. "What's the matter, mate? Cat got your tongue? Or is it that ridiculous hat weighing you down?" The crowd chuckled nervously. Some were amused by Jason's boldness, while others felt a growing sense of unease. They knew that provoking the Royal Guard was a dangerous game. Ethan didn't react, his expression as still as a statue. Not satisfied with the lack of response, Jason decided to escalate. He began circling Ethan, making exaggerated gestures and mocking his stance. "Look at this guy, everyone. Standing here like he's some kind of robot. Hey mate, ever thought about smiling? Might do some good." The tension in the air was palpable. Some members of the crowd murmured disapproval, while others filmed the scene, anticipating drama. As Jason continued his antics, a little girl in the crowd tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy," she whispered, "why is that man being mean to the guard?" Her mother frowned, shaking her head. "Some people don't understand respect, sweetheart." But Jason was oblivious to the growing discontent around him. Fueled by the laughter of his friends, he took his taunts a step further. He reached out, daring to touch the edge of Ethan's bearskin hat. That was the moment everything changed. Ethan, who had been standing still for the entire encounter, suddenly moved. In one swift motion, he took a step forward, his polished boots striking the ground with an authoritative thud. His voice, sharp and commanding, echoed through the air. "Do not touch the uniform," Ethan barked. The crowd gasped. Jason stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden shift. For the first time, he realized he might have pushed things too far. But instead of backing down, Jason's ego took over. "What are you going to do about it, mate?" he sneered, trying to mask his growing unease. Ethan's expression remained impassive, but his next words sent a chill through the air. "Step back now, or you'll be removed." Jason hesitated, glancing back at his friends, who were now uncharacteristically silent. The crowd watched with bated breath, their phones recording every second. Jason smirked, trying to save face. All right, calm down," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. But as he turned to leave, he muttered under his breath, "Touchy lot, aren't they?" What Jason didn't know was that his actions had already been reported. Within moments, a second guard arrived, accompanied by a palace security officer. Together, they escorted Jason and his friends away from the gates, their protests falling on deaf ears. The incident didn't end there. Videos of Jason's encounter with the Royal Guard quickly went viral, garnering millions of views across social media platforms. Comments poured in, with people from around the world expressing their opinions. "Serves him right," one commenter wrote. "The Royal Guard represents centuries of tradition. You don't mess with that." Others weren't as kind. "This guy thought he was funny, but all he did was make a fool of himself," another comment read. Jason, once so full of confidence, found himself the target of ridicule. Memes of his failed attempt to provoke the guard flooded the internet, and his reputation took a massive hit. Even his friends, who had once cheered him on, began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with his public humiliation. Months later, Jason returned to Buckingham Palace, not as a prankster, but as a humbled observer. Standing quietly among the crowd, he watched the royal guards with a newfound respect. He realized that their stoicism wasn't a weakness, but a strength, a testament to their dedication and discipline. As he left the palace grounds that day, Jason couldn't help but smile. He had learned his lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson he would never forget.